He signed the papers on a Thursday morning. Quick sale. Below market value. The estate agent had warned him he was leaving money on the table. He said he didn't care. He just wanted it done. His father had been gone for 3 months. The house was empty. The mortgage had been paid off decades ago. The contents had been sorted. At least, that is what he told himself when he moved through the rooms quickly that one afternoon with 2 bin bags and a cardboard box. He kept the watch, the photographs, a few books. He left the furniture for the new owners. He signed the papers. He drove away. He did not look back at the house. He was 41 years old. He told himself this was the practical thing to do. He told himself his father would have understood. He told himself he would feel better once it was done. He did not feel better. And 14 days after the sale completed, the new owners called him. They had found something inside the walls of the house, something his father had hidden there, and nothing was ever the same after that. Before I tell you what they found, I want to ask you something. Is there something a parent or grandparent left behind? A letter, an object, a story you only heard part of, that you wish you had paid more attention to while they were still here? Something that meant nothing at the time, but that you now understand held everything? Drop it in the comments below. Just one line. Because this story is about the things our parents hide from us, not to deceive us, but to protect us, until the right moment arrives for us to understand. And if this is your first time here, subscribe before this video ends. Every week on this channel I tell stories like this one. Stories about the things we carry, the things we leave behind, and the things that find us, long after we thought we had finished looking. Now let me tell you about James, and about the father he thought he knew, and about what was waiting inside the walls of a house he almost let go of forever. James Alderton was 41 years old. He lived in a city 3 hours from the town where he had grown up. He had left at 18 and returned infrequently. Not because he and his father had fallen out, not because of anything dramatic or defining, just because life had pulled him in a direction that was away from where he had started. And once you have been away long enough, returning feels like an effort that requires a reason. He visited at Christmas, occasionally at Easter, his father's birthday in September, when he remembered it early enough to organize the drive. His father never complained about the infrequency. His father, a man called Arthur, was not a complaining kind of man. Arthur Alderton was 78 when he died. He had been a carpenter for 40 years, the kind of carpenter who made things properly, who understood wood the way some people understand language, instinctively, structurally, with a deep respect for what it could become in the right hands. He had built the kitchen in the house where James grew up, the bookshelves in the sitting room, the wardrobes in both bedrooms, the garden shed that had outlasted 3 neighbors' garden sheds through 2 decades of weather. He had built things to last. That was Arthur's standard. Whatever you make it to last. James had inherited his father's precision, but not his patience. He was good at his job, something in logistics, details, moving things from one place to another efficiently. But he moved through life at a speed that Arthur had sometimes watched with something between admiration and concern. After Arthur's wife, James's mother, died 11 years ago, Arthur had lived alone in the house. James visited more frequently in that first year, then less frequently, then at the intervals that had come to define their relationship. Christmas, Easter, September. Arthur filled the time between with his workshop, with the neighbors he had known for 30 years, with the particular self-sufficiency of a man who had always known how to be alone without being lonely. James had told himself his father was fine. Arthur had never told him otherwise. Arthur Alderton was not a man who talked easily about himself. This was not unusual for men of his generation. But with Arthur, it went slightly deeper than generation. He had grown up in a house where private things stayed private, where difficulty was absorbed quietly and released slowly, if at all. His own father had been the same, and his father before that. A lineage of men who expressed love through presence and practical action, through the kitchen they built and the shed that outlasted everyone else's, rather than through words that arrived unannounced and asked to be received. James had grown up knowing his father loved him. He had never doubted it, but he had grown up in the particular way that children of quiet men grow up, understanding love as something demonstrated rather than declared, shown in the homework helped with patiently at the kitchen table, in the car fixed at 6 in the morning before James needed it, in the voicemail left every Sunday without fail, not long voicemails, just, "It's your dad, just checking in. Hope the week is going well. Give me a call when you get a chance." James always called back. Eventually, he was a good son. He told himself he was a good son, and he was, just not always a present one. Arthur's health declined in the last 2 years. His heart, mainly. The kind of decline that announces itself gradually and then accelerates in the final months. James visited more in that last year. He was there at the end. He sat beside the bed, the way Daniel had sat beside Margaret's bed, holding a hand he had not held since childhood. Arthur died on a Monday morning in February, quietly, in the way he had done most things. James drove home after the funeral, with the watch and the photographs and a cardboard box. And he began the process of closing down his father's life. The estate needed sorting. That was the language James used to himself. Practical language. Task language. The language of someone who handles grief by converting it into a list of things to be done. There was not much to sort. Arthur had lived simply. His bank accounts were modest. His possessions were modest. The house was the main asset. A 3-bedroom terrace in a town that had become more desirable in recent years. The estate agent estimated a sale value that surprised James slightly. More than he had expected. He could have taken time. He could have cleared it properly. Could have gone through every room with the attention it deserved. Instead, he drove up on a Saturday, spent 4 hours moving through the house with bin bags and a cardboard box, and drove home again. He told himself he would come back properly at the weekend. He did not come back. The estate agent handled viewings. There was an offer within 2 weeks. Below asking price, but acceptable. James accepted without negotiating. He signed the papers on a Thursday morning. Quick sale. Below market value. Done. The solicitor sent paperwork. He signed it. The keys were handed over. The house that Arthur Alderton had lived in for 43 years. The house where James had grown up. The house where his mother had died in the room at the front. The house built from 40 years of careful carpenter's work, passed to new owners on a Wednesday afternoon. James had not been present for the handover. He received a notification from his solicitor. He read it. He went back to his desk. He told himself he felt fine. He did not feel fine. But he was good at not examining that too closely. 14 days after the sale completed, his phone rang at 10:30 on a Sunday morning. A number he didn't recognize. He answered. A man's voice, slightly uncertain. The voice of someone who is not sure if they are doing the right thing by calling. He said his name was Paul. He said he and his wife had just bought the house on Ferndale Road. James said yes. Paul said he was sorry to disturb him. He said they had started some work on the back bedroom, the one that had been James's father's bedroom. They were going to knock through, expand the room. The builders had started pulling out the interior wall, and inside the wall cavity, behind the plasterboard, they had found something. James was quiet. He said, "Found something?" Paul said yes. He said it appeared to be a tin box, old, sealed. His wife had wanted to open it immediately. Paul had said they should call first. He said, "I thought you should know. Whatever is inside it belonged to your father. I thought you might want to come and get it." James sat down. He realized he had been standing without knowing it. He said, "A tin box." Paul said, "Yes. It looks like it has been there a long time. The plasterboard was original, as far as the builders could tell. Probably been in that wall for decades." James thought about his father, about the man who built things to last, about the kitchen and the bookshelves and the wardrobes and the shed. about the man who kept private things private, about all the things Arthur had never said out loud. He said, "I'll come on Saturday." He drove up on the Saturday morning, the same road he had driven dozens of times, but different now. He passed the school, the park where his father had taught him to ride a bicycle on a Sunday morning 33 years ago, the carpenter's workshop that had closed 10 years ago, but whose sign was still faintly readable on the wall if you knew where to look. He turned onto Ferndale Road. The house looked the same from the outside. It looked exactly the same. New owners, same bricks. The garden his mother had planted, and his father had maintained in her memory, still there. The door was the same color. His father had repainted it 5 years ago. He sat in the car for a moment. He had not been back since the Saturday with the bin bags. He noticed things he had not noticed that Saturday. The care with which the brickwork at the front had been pointed. His father's work. The window frames, straight and precise. His father's work. The small detail above the front door. A carved wooden surround, barely noticeable, that James had never, not once, consciously looked at in 41 years. His father's work. He got out of the car. He knocked on the door of his father's house. Paul was a decent man. James understood this within 30 seconds of meeting him. He offered tea. He showed James the bedroom where the work had started, a hole in the wall where the plasterboard had come away. The builders had been careful when they realized what they had found. Paul pointed to the tin on the windowsill. It was smaller than James had expected. Old, green, the kind of tin that might once have held biscuits or tobacco. The lid was sealed with a thick wrap of electrical tape that had aged to brittleness. On the top, in his father's handwriting, 3 words, "For James." Eventually, James stood in the half-demolished bedroom of the house he had sold, looking at a tin box his father had sealed inside a wall, and he understood, with complete clarity, that he had almost let this go forever. If Paul had been a different kind of man, if his wife had won the argument about opening it immediately, if the builders had disposed of it without thinking, James would never have known it existed. He sat on the edge of the bed that was not yet his father's bed, and not yet Paul's bed, but something in between. He picked up the tin. He peeled the electrical tape away slowly. His hands were not steady. The lid required some effort. And then it opened. Inside the tin were 5 things: a letter, a photograph, a small key, a folded piece of paper, and a ring. James picked up the letter first, his father's handwriting. The precise, careful writing of a man accustomed to measuring twice and cutting once. The date at the top was 7 years ago. 7 years. His father had placed this inside that wall 7 years ago, while James was 3 hours away, while they were speaking on the phone once a month, if that, while Arthur was quietly, privately preparing something he never mentioned. The letter was not long. Arthur was not a man who used more words than necessary, but every word was the right one. He wrote that he had been trying to decide what to leave James for years, not in terms of money or possessions. Those were simple to arrange. He had been trying to decide what to leave that was actually worth leaving. He wrote that he had watched James grow into a man he was proud of, not in the way he had always meant to say that out loud, and had always found, when the moment came, that the words stayed somewhere between his chest and his throat and would not come. He wrote that he understood James was busy, that he had never held the infrequent visits against him, that he had simply been glad of the visits that came and had not spent the time between them cataloging the ones that didn't. He wrote, "I was not always easy to talk to. I know that. I was made a certain way, and I did not always work hard enough to become a different way. That is one of my regrets. Not the biggest one, but one of them." He wrote about James's mother, about the 37 years they had spent together, about what it had meant to him to watch her become a mother, about the morning James was born, which Arthur had never described to James in any detail, not once, in 41 years. He described it now, in 3 paragraphs that James read twice, and then a third time. He wrote about the ring. "This was your grandmother's. Your mother wore it for 37 years. I took it back after she died, because I was not ready to let it go. I am ready now. Give it to someone when the time is right. Or keep it. Either is fine. It just needs to stay in the family. He wrote about the key. The key opens the box at the back of the workshop. The one I always told you was empty. It was not empty. There are things in there I made over the years that I never showed anyone. Some of them are not very good. Some of them I am quietly proud of. They are yours now. Do whatever you want with them. He wrote about the folded piece of paper. This is the address of a man called Robert Haynes. He was my best friend from the age of 7 until we lost touch in our 30s. I have thought about him for 50 years and never found the courage to make contact. I don't know if he is still alive, but if he is, and if you ever feel like making contact on my behalf, tell him I thought about him. That is all, just that I thought about him. And at the very bottom of the letter, in slightly larger writing than the rest, as if he had written it last and had finally found the room for it, I love you, James. I should have said that more. It was always true. I just was not always good at the saying of it. I hope you know it anyway. I think you probably know it anyway. But just in case, there it is. Your dad. James sat on the edge of that bed for a very long time. The tin in his lap, the letter in his hand. Paul and his wife had quietly left the room. Outside, the garden his father had kept in his mother's memory. Still there, still kept. The way Arthur had kept everything, quietly, precisely, to last. James found the box in the workshop. The key worked. Inside were 17 objects, carved wooden pieces, small things. A bird that was rough in places but whose wings had been shaped with extraordinary care. A small bowl, smooth, perfectly balanced, made from a piece of wood Arthur had clearly loved enough to use carefully. A chess piece. A child's toy horse. James recognized it. He had owned that toy horse at 4 years old, and lost it, and cried about it. His father had made another one. He had kept it in a locked box for 37 years. James sat in the workshop with the 17 objects around him. He looked at them for a long time. He called Robert Haynes 3 weeks later. The address was old, but the family still lived there. Robert's daughter answered. She said her father was still alive. She said he was 81 and still sharp. She said she would pass on the message. Robert called James the following day. They spoke for 45 minutes. Robert said he had thought about Arthur for 50 years. He said he had wanted to make contact 100 times. He said he had never quite found the courage. He said he was glad James had called. He said, "Your father was the best kind of man, the kind you don't always appreciate until you are old enough to understand what that means." James agreed. He sat in his apartment with the toy horse on the desk in front of him, and he agreed completely. Arthur Alderton never said "I love you" easily. That was the architecture of the man, built in a certain way, strong where strength was needed, occasionally closed where openness would have served better. He spent 7 years preparing something he never found the words to say in person. He sealed it in a tin. He hid it inside a wall. He trusted that eventually, in whatever form eventually took, his son would find it. He was almost wrong about that. 14 days. That is how close James came to never knowing. If he had waited longer before selling, if Paul had been a different kind of man, if the builders had worked faster, 14 days and 37 years of a father's love would have been sealed inside a wall forever. I want you to sit with that for a moment, not as a warning about selling houses, as a warning about time, about the things we assume there will be more time to say, the words that stay between the chest and the throat and never quite come, the visits we keep meaning to make once things settle, the conversations we defer because the moment never feels exactly right. Arthur ran out of moments. He used the only one he had left, a tin box sealed inside a wall 7 years before his death, because he had not used the ones that came before it. We do not all get a tin box. We do not all get a Paul who calls instead of opens. Most of us get silence. And silence does not tell you what you almost had. If there is something you have been meaning to say to someone, a parent who is still here, a friend who is still reachable, a person who has been waiting longer than you realize. Say it today, not in a tin box, not sealed inside a wall for someone else to find. Today, in whatever words you have, the imperfect words said today are worth infinitely more than the perfect words prepared for a moment that may never come. Arthur loved his son completely. His son always knew it. But knowing and hearing are two different things, and James would have gone his whole life knowing, without ever hearing, if Paul had not made one phone call on a Sunday morning. Don't be the tin box. Say it now, while the person you love is still on the other side of a phone call, still reachable, still here. If this story reached something in you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if there is something you have been meaning to say, go say it. Right now, before this video ends. Subscribe to the Untold Cost for a new story every week. Stories about the things we hide, the things we almost lose, and the things that find us. When we are finally ready to receive them, I will see you in the next one.